Hey everyone, this is Stephen Rader, and for my midterm presentation, I'd like to talk about Beethoven's String Quartet number 13, Opus 130, Movement 2. Here's a snippet of the sound for you. All right, now that you've sort of got it in your head, let me sort of talk us through the form. As you can see, I've analyzed this as an ABA prime form, so compound ternary, because each of those three sections breaks down into a smaller form. Let's get started with our first big A section, which I've analyzed as being a binary subform, A and B. We can see our small a being these 8 bars, ending here with this repeat, and then continuing on with the next 8 bars. Some nice color coordination there, dark blue and light blue. Interesting things to note, we have a motive which we will be seeing a lot of, and sure enough Beethoven gives it to us plenty with a sequence starting on F, starting on E flat, starting on D flat, and again here, and we are going to see it modified in measure 9, where he not only states it on a different pitch, but it's still the same motive, but then he expands on it to make it a sort of 2-measure snippet. We have lots of antecedent and consequent phrases throughout, most of which tend to be, if not symmetrical, then certainly very similar, and we'll talk about those as we go on. Some interesting quick harmonic progressions. Real quick note, we're in B flat minor with 5 flats, not in D flat major. What's interesting is that the piece moves so quickly, presto and cut time, that you can argue either way that this harmonic progression is 2 chords per bar, or you could also just say it's 1 chord per bar. We have 1, 7, 6, and so on, descending bass line. However, I've labeled these in between chords, which aren't completely fleshed out. We have an E flat in the bass, and we have a B flat in the viola, but our only G flat, which we would need to make an E flat minor chord, ends after beat 3, which is before the cello picks up the bass note on beat 4. Also, I just realized I labeled this a minor 6. I meant a minor 4. I guess I am dyslexic, and I did it here as well. Oh well. So we can see this harmonic progression. I have analyzed it with 2 chords per bar because it makes the progression 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, and 1, which you may have heard about in early theory classes. It's a common progression for strong harmonic progression, for lack of a better word. We see the same harmonic progression here, 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, but this time, instead of ending on 2 to 5.5 cadence, we jump to the 5 a little bit early, and it's a 5/7 instead of a normal 5, and we land on 1 with a B flat, the tonic, in the lowest voice and in the highest voice, giving us a perfect authentic cadence. Woo! So that is our first small a of the binary. Let's move on to B, the small b. Another antecedent phrase of a 2x2 and another consequent phrase, but a couple interesting things. First of all, I know we're in a different subsection because we have modulated to D flat major. You could argue that this actually isn't a modulation to D flat major because we go back to B flat minor so quickly, and because it's the relative major and relative minor, they have the same exact key signature. However, we have the cello resting on an A flat here, and by resting I mean playing an A flat here, all the way throughout these 4 bars, which would be very unusual in B flat minor, but in D flat major it's the dominant. So what we have here is a 1/6/4 to a sort of a 5/7. There's no third in the 5/7 unless you count this C for an A flat 7 chord hanging over from below. That's why I put the 5/7 in parentheses. However, this sounds nonetheless like a big dominant chord, just building up tension, and our ears want it to resolve to a D flat major chord here to verify the modulation, but instead we go to D flat minor in a deceptive cadence, and what's more, the motion continues because 5/7 to 6 happens here, but that 6 is also the minor 1 in B flat minor, and then we continue on. So it's not only a deceptive cadence, it's an elided deceptive cadence. However, we nonetheless preserve the weak and strong cadential relationship points because we end on a perfect authentic cadence here with our 1-6-4-5. Kind of cute. He's referencing this 1-6-4 to 5 up here, but it ends early. It states early and ends on a 1 to give us a nice, perfect, authentic cadence to close off part 1. That was our A. Let's go on to our B section. And I know that this is a new section because we have a new key signature. We are going from B flat minor to B flat major, the parallel major. It's unprepared, so it's an unprepared modulation, but it still makes sense to our ear because of the relationship between B flat minor to B flat major. We also have a new time signature, which means that our harmonic rhythm is much changed. We have now roughly 1 chord per bar, which now sounds like 1 chord every 6 beats instead of 1 chord every 2 beats. Big difference. We also have a new motive here, which Beethoven is going to start developing and completely ditch the old motive. You can see sort of some aspects of the old motive, for example, this do, ti, do being referenced here and so on, but realistically it's an entirely new motive that is not expanded upon in terms of, like we saw before, in terms of length of starting with 1 bar and going to 2 bars. Instead, we are going to see Beethoven develop this motive by just extending it to new heights. This is a higher octave than before, and to new places, whereas originally we saw this in a B flat major. We're now going to see it in an F chord and so on. Some symmetrical phrases, another antecedent consequence, landing on perfect authentic cadence, 1s and 5s, nothing too complicated here, which is another suggestion that we're in a new section, because before things were very busy and very fast. Because here's some image. So second happens here. So first measure, then next measure. Same motive, by the way, but we're changing things a little bit because we're about to go to different places. First of all, a longer phrase. This is 8 bars, each of which happens twice. Second of all, we're starting in a new key, F, which is the dominant, and we're moving toward D minor, which is the relative minor, with a minor 6, 6-4, to a 5-7 of 6, to what would be a 6 in the key of F. But we're not in the key of F. Starting around here, we're in the key of D minor, where this would be a minor 1-6-4, a 5-7 to a 1. There's that 1-6-4, 5-7, 1 again. And from there, we have the same exact figures as before, same melody in the violin 1, same accompanimental patterns. Another consequent phrase. But now we have a turnaround to B flat major. You can tell Mozart is really getting his thematic interest from key changes rather than from extending phrases to make them longer or such and such. And you can see B flat major sort of start to crop up around here. D flat minor could have been the minor 1, or you could say it's minor 3 in B flat. But from here, we have a sort of 2-5-1 in the key of F if you still want to be thinking in the key of F, but really we're headed toward B flat major. So this would be almost like a 6 because it's a G chord, to a 2, to a 5, to a 1, going to the key of B flat major. And this is necessary, excuse me, because here our small a of our large B section returns, our red section, which if you remember was in the key of B flat. So Mozart had to figure out a clever way to return to this section if he wanted to repeat it. And he did want to repeat it because the form is rounded binary, ABA. So just to recap, this first red section is our small a, this orange section is our B, and then we return to our A section. The reason Mozart doesn't use a repeat here to send us for this red section is he changes it a little bit. For example, this motive is an octave up from the first time we saw it, and there's a couple other small changes, but in essence it's still ABA, and then this repeat sends us back to the beginning of the B. So rounded binary form, A, B, and you could really put that second A in parentheses because it is just A and B, and the second B happens to have the A sort of tucked within it. From there, we get onto this interesting transition section. So here's, again, our elided PAC, but this time we're not heading directly off into another key. Beethoven is actually interested in verifying the key of B flat, which we can see he introduces some new motives, including a scale that goes up to B flat, which is repeated again here, going up to B flat, and then is repeated again, going very slowly. And then we have a violin scale, chromatic scale, going down. But what's interesting is because it's chromatic, we're starting to blur the lines between major and minor, and that makes sense because this whole statement, this whole purple section is about heading back to A, which, spoilers, right down here. We were in the key of B flat major, but we're about to be in the key of B flat minor, so Beethoven really needs to lead us back to B flat minor. And he can especially do this here with this statement that goes F, F, G flat, where just like this one that goes F, E flat, F, G flat. He omits the E flat, but no big deal. This, I still think, is derived from this here, especially since they're both in cut time, whereas before we were in 6/4. And so we return to 6/4 again, we do the statement again, and we return to 6/4 again, and we do the descending chromatic line, but we don't go to this theme. We go to the theme that was derived from the original motif, and we're back to A. It's an A prime, but it's really the same thing. We have a binary form. We have our 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. We have our antecedents and our consequence. The only changes that happen in this A prime that weren't present in the first A is that we write out our repeats. So instead of having a repeat at the end of 8 bars, Beethoven just writes out the repeat. So here's the same motive as before, however, it's ornamented. So instead of having a quarter note and then 2 eighth notes, we have a dotted quarter note with a trill for a little extra excitement, and then some 16th notes. We land on the same G flat, and then we octave displace the G flat for a little more excitement. But really, these are both of these blues are our small A section being repeated twice. Then we go into our light blue section, which is our B section, which again, you'll probably recognize our brief modulation to D flat, our 1, 6, 4 to 5, 7, so on and so forth, our antecedent, our half cadence, our consequent, our perfect authentic cadence, ending in our 1, 6, 4 to 5 to 1, all of which, those 8 bars, is repeated with this darker blue-green section here. And again, that's just because Beethoven wanted to ornament with a trill on a dotted quarter and 16th notes instead of just writing a repeat. This does sound final to the ear and sort of, quote-unquote, should be the end of the piece because we're ending in a perfect authentic cadence. We have a 1 chord, we have the tonic in the root and in the soprano. What more could we want? But Beethoven decides to drag it out with a coda. And that's our whole purple section. Some interesting things happen here. The motif goes down to the viola and switches with the violin 1 that takes the accompanimental pattern. Violin 2 has some pizzicato, which we haven't seen before, but we still have our 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, but no 1. Oh my gosh. Instead, we end in a half cadence. We don't resolve it, and we do it again, just the tail end of it, the 6-2-5, but again, there's no 1. And we do it again, 6-2-5, but there's no 1. And then finally, after sort of mounting all of this tension in doing half cadence after half cadence after half cadence, Beethoven gives us the same figure, but gets to the 5 early so that he can land on the 1 right on the downbeat and give us a perfect authentic cadence. And that concludes the coda of our our compound ternary form AB A prime. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your videos. Have a good one.